What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers, fresh off recording what I'd call my favorite War Room episode so far of the summer, featuring the grand return of Dan Hanzus, who comes on usually once or twice a year for us and is now part of our great underdog family here. CR, that was a fun one that I highly recommend everyone goes to listen to if you're not upgraded to War Room yet. How you doing? How you feeling?
Amazing. I mean, that's whenever we have Dan on, there's a lot of, it's very odd, isn't it? That in the national media, there's a decent percentage of Jets fans, like real
Yes.
Jets fans. I mean, Dan is easily on the Mount Rushmore. He might be our favorite national media Jets fan, I would say, to have on the show. So it's authentic. He still cares about the team, always brings a good, shot of optimism to the show. We have such a good time. So it's exciting for him starting Heed the Call with Underdog. It's going to be an awesome show with the experience that, him and Mark have. So yeah, a lot of fun. The War Room content keeps, we keep cranking it out. It's nice that we get to do that extra show a week because there's so much going on with the Jets right now that the main podcast needs to talk about. The Hassan Reddick holdout, Joe Tippmann's good days and bad days of snapping the football, Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson trying to improve the team and everybody thinking instead it's fighting. So when we use the War Room show to have these, extra conversations that are a lot of fun.
Yes, it's a good why we play recording. This is why we podcast. Just a bunch of Jet fans having a good time talking about being optimistic yet again before we go into the season, which is always an adventure. Now, we'll start with Reddick, and then we're going to rip through a bunch of stuff and preview. We got a game this week. We got the over-under 34, Jets +3, noon kickoff Saturday. Get excited. Summer of Peasley ready to begin. We'll get to that in the back half of the pod. However, we did say August 5th was the panic date for Haason Reddick. It's August 6th. It seems like there's no end in sight. We've made it. There's been very limited chatter that this could be close. A lot of questions, understandably, in the Discord about who's really in the wrong here and what's going on here. Getting more tweets like F this dude, like who needs him.
Oh, so, God.
Let's be clear. The Jets
defense stop that right away, please.
The Jets defense needs him, and there won't be any issue in the locker room with him. Players don't get involved in other players' contract situations and understand everyone trying to get as much money as possible. It's a complicated one. I'm certainly sure there is a world where Reddick initially said, look, I'll play in the last year of the deal. And then, they trade John Franklin Myers. Danielle Hunter signs his contract and things change. And that's business, unfortunately, on both sides. And for the Jets, I understand maybe them being look, we're not going to budge on this right now. We think we could wait it out and keep finding him. I do think at a certain point, both sides, there's too much incentive to get this done, right? Reddick doesn't want to keep getting fined. He wants to accrue another year and get paid. How much longer are you really going to sit out? The Jets need to win now. They need Reddick because it's been a quiet-ish camp for Will McDonald, enough so that Michael Clemens is the starter right now, and that's not good enough with him and Jermaine Johnson. They need more. They need Reddick. That's why they traded for him. So we're about a real few days away from this being an annoying distraction to what the hell are we doing here when we have to win right now? And both sides are just in this staring match. And I don't want to hammer Reddick too much. I don't want to hammer the Jets too much. My guess is this is probably more of an ownership thing than a front office thing based on no inside source, just a guess based on what we've seen here. When the hell is this going to get done? I still think it's they have the first preseason game and everyone's dude, come on. And they find a way to do this Band-Aid contract for 2 years and Reddick gets paid and Jets get this situation off their back. And then Reddick has a full month to get ready for the season. But I could be wrong. Where are we at here? And whose fault is this?
Well, the blame game is just, it's never ending. I think at the end of the day, there are so many ways you can go with that because you could look at it and say, okay, well, and we've done this before, but it all starts when the Jets didn't get out in front of a Bryce Huff extension because there was a time where you were probably able to retain a 25-year-old Bryce Huff for about, figure $12 to $14 million a year, 2 of the 3 years guaranteed. That's not a big contract in the NFL. And the Jets didn't get out in front of it. And like I feel like I should whisper this. It kind of feels like Michael Carter is trending towards a similar situation.
Fun.
Right. Like we are almost watching history repeat itself. Now, I do think this is a defense that, as great as Carter has been, can develop a slot. It's very hard to just, program style, like, oh, we got a pass rusher in the waiting all the time. The NFL is just not that easy at pass rusher. I'm not saying the slot's that easy, but maybe that's the thought process there. It feels like history's already repeating itself there. Then Huff made it all the way to free agency, and everybody knew he was getting a monster contract, and the Jets weren't willing to go there for whatever reason, and it was guaranteed money across multiple years, so instead they let him walk, and they trade for a guy, ironically from the same team, that I think the Jets wanted a mercenary, right? Like a hired gun, 1 year, playing for his next contract, going to have 15 sacks. They'll figure out if they keep him or let him go in that year, depending on what Will McDonald looks like and how they feel and all these things. But here's the thing. The whole concept of the Jets saying, show up and perform and we'll revisit, a contract at the end of the year. That doesn't mean shit to an athlete, right? It doesn't mean shit to somebody in the corporate world. Like, we've all been there at some point in our lives where you are doing a job and you are also doing the job that is ahead of you, and you're asking your boss saying, well, when am I getting promoted to the job that I'm already doing? And they say, we'll revisit it during the annual review period. And that's the way the game goes, and it sucks. And that's what it sounds like the Jets kind of told Hassan Reddick. But you can't do that to somebody that had double-digit sacks 4 years in a row. You can't play that game with Hassan Reddick. So I get the fans that are like, well, he went back on his word. We don't know that. Hassan Reddick was being quite loud with Philadelphia that he wanted a contract. So he just changed his mind when the Jets traded for him. It's hard to believe leaks on either side of the whole thing. The bottom line is everybody looks really bad here, right? Because Hassan Reddick is getting fined a ton of money and could be paid a ton of money after this season if he has a big year, which he will. And the Jets need him. You could say it with your chest, everyone. I am probably one of the biggest Will McDonald believers in the world, and I still understand that the Jets need Hassan Reddick really badly. He is an integral part of making this defense not good, not great, but elite. The Jets want to be an elite defense this year. They want an elite defense that can carry them to a Super Bowl. Hassan Reddick, your top pure pass rusher, right? Is he your top pure edge? No, like Jermaine Johnson's a little more rounded, but your best pure pass rusher is Reddick. So you need him here. So you got to figure it out. And I don't know if that means you got to add a year onto his deal. I don't know if you got to sweeten the pot this year, but that's what you get paid to do, and that's what you got to figure out. And the fact that this is not done a full week into August, just it's a bad look. What do you want to say? Like, it's a bad look. This is all the vibes are in the right place besides this, and it's a dark cloud hanging over the team.
Yeah, it's when you compound it with letting Huff go, and when you compound it with the reality that Reddick is 4 straight seasons of double-digit sacks. We've been watching the Jets our whole life. That doesn't happen. That they just don't have players like that who that consistently get 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 sacks. You've done everything else this offseason. You got Tyron Smith at his age. You got Mike Williams off his injury. You traded for Morgan Moses. Don't half measure it at this point. Spend the extra money, get it done, and put this cloud away, because as you said, there's not enough with the pass rush, and Saleh needs pass rushers. Ulbrich needs pass rushers. That's how this defense flourishes. They finally have a chance to be playing with a lead with some regularity because they don't have a dented Traffic Cohen at quarterback. And you're going to roll out third downs with Clemens and Will McDonald and like maybe testing a UDFA. Like, go get Hassan Reddick while you have Quinnen Williams chewing up blockers on the interior and Jermaine Johnson on the other side. Like, that is the model how this team wins the AFC East. Doesn't scrap to go 9-8 and be a 7 seed like the Mason Rudolph Steelers and lose by 30 round 1. That's not what we're trying to play for this year. So go get the damn thing done. We're tired of talking about this. I'd rather talk about the ridiculous unofficial depth chart and preview this first preseason game. I say ridiculous because
tradition like no other, by the way.
It's a tradition like no other. It's put together by the communication staff. I also didn't think there was anything like too shocking there. Like, we knew Gibson was going to be listed ahead of Corley. That makes sense. Let the rookie earn it. Max Mitchell ahead of Carter Warren. Only if you're a deep cut Jet fan are you stressing out about that in any meaningful way. And, beyond that, there wasn't really anything too shocking there. These final roster spots are, somewhat inconsequential potentially when you're such a top heavy roster. So the preseason, we look at this game, right? Rodgers obviously isn't going to play. I have to imagine Breece Hall isn't going to play. I know Tyron Smith isn't going to play. I'm going to assume Morgan Moses isn't going to play. Don't think we're probably seeing Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams.
How much Olu do we get?
I think you're going to get a lot of Olu.
Really? I would be a little careful.
This is the same staff who gave Breece Hall 50 carries in the snow.
I have no faith in them management player-wise. Bryce Huff was in the fourth quarter of a preseason game last year. Okay, I
am very much expecting like a full half of Olu and Will McDonald playing into the fourth quarter of this game. Like without a doubt, I could see something like that happening. Those are two in particular we're going to be watching for, which makes sense. It's their last 2 first-round picks. I think we're going to see a ton of them. How the hell does the receiver rotation work? I don't want to see Garrett Wilson involved at all. So it's like the great Malik Taylor, Malachi Corley. Is Gibson playing? He just got back from an injury. Can Brownlee start to distinguish himself? He started to make a couple more plays recently. Running back, you want to see plenty of Allen and Davis, but you also don't want to overdo it, especially with Allen in the preseason. Like
Wait, does Tyrod play?
Tyrod's got to start. Yes,
I wouldn't play Tyrod.
What, they're going to start Peasley? We're going Peasley Daniels week one?
So here's the double-edged sword of it. One, I wouldn't play Tyrod because he's an injury-prone integral part of this team. But the double-edged sword of it is you can't evaluate anything if you just throw Peasley and Martinez out there.
Martinez.
So you have to play Tyrod if you want to evaluate the wide receivers. It's I don't like that though. I get it.
I think he plays
game 2 and 3. I full go. I'm talking game. I treat this like the Hall of Fame game to me. They're not gonna though.
No, they won't. I think we get 2-3 Tyrod series. Peasley, then Martinez. So we're big on the under this week, to put it lightly. I think you get a lot of Isaiah Davis carries. Is he? I mean, he's been like, I haven't heard a whisper about him all summer. No. I know he's been a little banged up, but he's going to have to play a decent amount. They're not going to give Allen like 75 carries in the preseason when he's going to be the main backup. Like he'll get a lot in the second and third preseason game and just be out there trucking people, which will be fun. But it feels like this is the kind of game. It's like you give a lot of carries to your third and fourth running back and you throw a lot of passes to like Kenny Yeboah and like Anthony Ferkser, who they just signed. And you kind of just keep it moving. And as always, I expect their defense to beat up on a rookie quarterback and like a shaky offensive line, kind of like the Carolina preseason game last year. So I'm expecting a lot of sacks, some ugly offense, and just give me like a lot of nice Olu tape. Like I'd love like next week to like watch you or Dan do like a little 8 minutes on like, look at Olu. He could start right now and like be completely fine. And we'll get some nice Will McDonald moments and like, cool. And maybe Malachi Corley, break a big play here or there. Like feel good.
Does Zach Kuntz exist?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I was kind of getting a little worried our guy Brownlee was starting to fall in that like Izzy Kuntz bucket where it's like, we're not hearing anything about him. It's kind of, we've heard a lot about Jamie Sherwood. Seems like he's having a nice year, which our Badlands conspiracy theory in the text chain is that this is like, and I'll give credit to Will on this, is this like the Jets are worried about Quincy Williams potentially holding out next year. So they're like laying the early groundwork that Sherwood is like not a step back at all. Let's see in the game. I hope he's good because they need depth at inside linebacker. But beyond that, like
nobody can run like Quincy.
Nobody can run like Quincy. But there's probably not too much overwhelmingly interesting stuff that's going to happen in this game. I just want to be honest and transparent. We get some good Olu reps. We get some nice moments from some of the first and second year guys. No injuries, and just kind of keep it moving. Is there any like deeper cut things you're like looking for?
Oh, I mean, obviously you want to see Corley have some moments because this will give him, I think that what the Jets probably look at with these games is the guys that are currently very role-specific players trying to round out the rest of their game. And what I mean by that is Corley's a Rolls-Royce gadget guy. So what is he going to look like actually getting to play wide receiver? Will McDonald is a pass rush specialist. So what is he going to look like playing, the nitty-gritty early downs against the run as well? I'll say this because it feels like he actually does exist now. Bernard Converse. There's been some good signs. There's been some good signs out of camp. What does he look like for this secondary? So I think there'll be a lot of eyes on him and Stiggers. I think those two guys that, will play a key role this summer of what they can or can't do. And then, we went through Olu. That feels like a big one. How much does Ruckert play? Because Ruckert's their solidified tight end too in an offense that I think runs a lot of 12 personnel this year. So he's almost cemented himself already. Yeah, and that's kind of where Izzy's going to have moments to make the roster over Davis because they just drafted Davis, but he's more explosive to me. I loved when after they drafted Braylon Allen, I was like, man, that's a backfield of three guys that all bring something different to the table, and then they drafted Davis, another kind of power runner. So it's interesting to see if they just move on from Izzy or if he can earn it in the summer. But I think those are the most important things to watch in game one. There's, like you said, a lot of the mainstays are just simply not going to play much at all. So you're going to want big moments from guys that are trying to crack the rotation, not as starters, but the rotation, and that's Brownlee, Will McDonald, Corley. Do we see the backup interior defensive linemen try to establish themselves? And that's Lecky Fotu, Tanzel Smart again, Bruce Hector,
Sandpaper, Jalen Holmes, maybe.
Right, and then the edge guys like Tack McKinley and Sandpaper Watts and Leonard Taylor on the interior as well. So yeah, that's kind of what this games are for.
Of course, we want to see no issues with Tippmann snaps. Just clean. Let him play 2-3 series, all clean snaps. Great.
Get his confidence up.
Got his confidence up, even though it was with Tyrod. It's all good. Becomes not a talking point anymore. Connor Williams was just signed by the Seahawks, by the way, right before we recorded this. Connor McGovern is still out there. I don't want to have to hit that button. Let's just roll with Tippmann, please. We did get some early Tetris talk about Fashanu, as Saleh said he could get some work at right tackle. And that I think is a little less shocking, right? Like if Morgan Moses gets hurt at some point, you're not keeping Fashanu on the bench and playing Max Mitchell. So it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
You would be crucified.
It just can't happen. The bigger question is Olu so good in camp in the preseason? At the first sign of an injury or an issue with an interior player, do the Jets go full Tetris and try to do something insane like play Morgan Moses at guard so Olu can play tackle? Versus trying to mess with Olu like they did with AVT and move him all over the place. I hope that doesn't become an issue because that means there's a problem on the interior. It means either AVT got hurt, Tippmann can't snap the ball, or Simpson's struggling. And it seems like it's been a good camp so far for Simpson, which has been encouraging. But I'm curious to see if and how that button is ever hit, if he's really good in the summer overall. And the preseason, he's going to be a fun guy to watch. And like you flagged, a couple interesting players in the secondary who are battling for some of those last roster spots to see if they can stick overall. But we get the joint practices starting up. You're listening to this Wednesday morning. They have joint practice Thursday, joint practice Friday. A lot of joint practices this summer, which we're not particularly thrilled about. That's where you get the key sort of Tippmann, Rodgers chemistry. How does their real starting offense look against Washington's defense? Can they go out and quote unquote win the days of joint practices? Joint practices get overanalyzed. We saw that a little bit with the Giants and the Lions this week, where it's what are we talking about here? Early August practices. That's where I think you'll probably see more interesting stuff, honestly, involving the main characters in this season. So what do you hope to get out of these joint practices beyond everyone getting the hell out of there healthy?
Right. Well, I think why they scheduled so many of these is that they would rather lean on these than playing their guys in the preseason a lot. This is where Rodgers is going to be treating it almost in a game script. And the offensive line needs to gel against a real pass rush in this situation. And, you'll be careful with the running back always, but Brees is going to be out there and all the wrinkles you want to do with him. Having those practice environments that are a little bit more controllable than a game is, where you feel like you can get more reps for the starters in the closest thing to a game setting rather than risking it in the preseason beyond a series or two. That is what I think the thought process is there. And honestly, you just want, there's no delay for the Jets season starting. They're starting in San Francisco. Like San Francisco is, maybe the best team in the NFC this year. So you got to fly across the country and play maybe the best team in the NFC against a coach that knows every single in and out how to beat your scheme, right? Like, let's not forget that either. So you need to be firing on all cylinders. You need to be running 100 miles an hour and lowering your pads. So I think, as much as I hate it, the amount of joint practices, I think there is a side to it that it gives you a real football setting and atmosphere that is a little bit more controllable than a preseason game atmosphere that is a way to get you up to speed for how crazy your kickoff is on week 1.
When you said kickoff, I was just remembered we get to watch this kick return in action for the first time, and it does look like Gibson will be the primary returner to start. But I'm curious how they
kind of need a second guy, right?
Yeah, is that going to be Corley? Is it going to be Paul's guy Codrington? I feel like it will probably be Corley. Like, ultimately, like, they're going to mix and match those two. Isaiah Davis, does he get some reps? It sounds like he's been in the mix too, which maybe doesn't initially, like, oh, would that be something he does? But with these new rules, like, could be a spot for him. So I'm curious, especially in a post Tariq Cohen world, who's going to chew up, these preseason kick returns. So that's another interesting thing to keep an eye on. And yeah, joint practice wise, use those to get everyone prepped for week 1, because I talked about this a little on War Room, and my concerns about the receiver depth chart aside, because they really need another receiver, and the Reddick situation. You look at Ayuk potentially getting traded, probably getting traded. McCaffrey's a little banged up now. Do you get the Niners at the right time in week 1 where you maybe steal one because your defense can mess with Purdy a little bit? And then now no Hopkins week 2 against the Titans. The Pats week 3, having a tough summer from everything we've seen.
Trying to trade for Ayuk, but
yep.
I
don't think that's enough where it's going to, the Jets are still 5-6 point favorites in that game at home. Broncos, you're probably 5, 6, 7 point favorites in that game at home. And then the Vikings. So, man, there's a path there to really start fast if they could knock out a few of these remaining issues over the summer. Get Reddick done, stabilize Tippmann, sort the back end of the receiver depth chart, and then maybe do some like light waiver wire work. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about the big move at receiver, but did they hit the button on a Renfro or a Michael Thomas or someone else just to kind of like maybe chew up some reps depending on how the next 3 weeks goes? I'm not advocating for that, but it's not out of the question. And teams add veterans like late in camp and before week 1. And it'll just be fun, honestly, to see them in the new uniforms, see them in the stadium, see the rookies out there for the first time. As you said, this could very much have like Hall of Fame game energy.
Right.
And kind of like you're going to be like in the third quarter of this being like, wow, basically 98% of the guys out here probably aren't going to make the team, but are they going to make the practice squad? Little more action game 2, little more action game 3, and then, the wait until Monday Night Football. But I would say overall, as we wrap here, you put the Reddick thing aside, I think generally it's been a pretty good 2 weeks to start camp. I think Rodgers is Rodgers. I think the stuff with him and Garrett is insane. And I think everyone kind of knows it's insane. Like, what do we talk? It's good that they're
It's what the Jets have
been
missing, by the way.
They need that. They need Rodgers also on everyone's ass, being like, we need to be better and cut out the bullshit penalties, drop passes, fumbles, letting our quarterback getting hit, late hit, not doing anything about it. They need that. I think overall it's been positive. Like, I'm not like, oh man, like this, there's warning signs here. It looks like
no panic at the scrimmage. Remember that?
No panic at the scrimmage. Like, it was like,
I was driving the other day and I thought of that. I don't know why. I guess because the Jets had their green and white scrimmage, which is so different now.
Yeah, it's just such a ho-hum, like quiet night, which compared to Zach Wilson going 2 for 11 with 2 picks and everyone freaking out was nice.
I've been to a couple green and white scrimmages in my life as media, and like I went up to one in Cortland where I was on the sidelines and it felt like a big deal. I went to one at MetLife and it felt like a big deal. And I didn't go to the one, admittedly, this year at Florham Park, but just from watching what I saw on Twitter, it kind of felt like a practice, right?
Yeah.
Like rather than...
They've dialed it back. It used to be like a whole thing. You go to the stadium. And
yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking of the panic at the scrimmage. What happened at panic at the scrimmage again? Zach threw 3 picks, or
I'm pretty sure it was Zach Wilson's rookie year, and he was just like awful. And the offense had no points, and like whoever the backup was at the time, I guess it was Mike White, came in and like played really well, and everyone was losing their minds because that was a bigger thing because they didn't do a lot of joint practices then, and it was. People would come out to that and be like, this is the first big moment in training camp. But it was that way for a really long time. I remember even going back to like the Pennington years, like the green and white scrimmage was like a big like moment in camp, or more so the Sanchez years. Not this year. It felt like just kind of like a glorified practice. And I think that's because they have 400 joint practices before all their preseason games. And it's just more of a veteran team. So I think we know we're reaching for stories like talking about the Jets. If we're talking about Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers having a normal wide receiver quarterback conversation on the sideline. And, it's more of like the traditional, like, oh, this like random second year player is like looking pretty good and he could be the 4th linebacker. And that's normal, healthy training camp discourse. It's all been there except for the Reddick situation, which again, I hope as we're recording this next week, after the preseason game, and we'll have post-game reaction to Saturday's game, which is nice and early during the day on the feed. We're not talking about this situation anymore. Also, big shout to everyone filling the Underdog League so fast today. We did our big money $100 buy, and 12 people signed up in 12 seconds.
Hottest ticket in town. Yeah, seriously. Hottest ticket in town. I'm glad I actually. It's bad. I joined, and there was 5 people in there already. And
you gotta hurry up.
I have to be in this, and I want to, but like you and I host the leagues, and I felt like if I waited another hour, I would have missed our own league. That's how demand it was.
We'll be teeing up another one before the end of August, and we'll be ripping higher lowers all season long. So sign up with promo code Badlands for a 50% deposit match. A lot of you really have signed up, which we greatly appreciate. As you can imagine, that is beneficial to our relationship with Underdog. So please keep doing that. Thank you. That's it. Feed's going to be packed. So you listen to this Wednesday. War Room is still live last night with Hansis. Please go listen to it. Great interview. My weekly article will be continuing to roll. We are very close to announcing another exciting new show on the feed. Buck the Trend every Friday. TOJ Talks Saturday. We'll rotate Will into how we cover and react to all these preseason games that are going to be on Saturday. So you'll hear from me, Will, and Connor over the weekend. And just a lot of stuff. And some merch at badlandstoj.com. We still got hats, so we have a couple of new things that are about to hit soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Let's get a win in that first preseason game. Let's bet the under and make some money, and we'll talk to everyone soon.